So hello YouTube friends, here we are, part 3 of the Patchwork dog, and here's the other bit. So what you should now have, it doesn't matter if you haven't, because all of these will be in a playlist called English Paper Piece Dog or something, and Prudence is still cross with me for making a dog, not a cat. But this method of doing this particular toy here, it was, I think it was the 70s I saw the pattern in a magazine years ago. It's been lovely to read the comments of all sorts of people who have this dog or have made this dog. Okay then, so I think I mentioned last time that we need 2 dogs going in opposite directions because it's the front and the back of the dog. It's obvious, isn't it? I think once I might have started sewing, partially sewing in the early days, 2 going the same way, but you quickly get the hang of that one. So we've got our 2 dogs here. If you haven't sewn yours together yet, great that I tell you this now. Whenever I make, although that one's not so good, but this one possibly, if you've got fabric that's sort of suggests the eye of the dog here, I mean that doesn't, one of the things you can do is put a big black button on there for the eye, and I've done that, but increasingly these days I make them with no eyes or buttons. You could sew on a little piece of felt, I suppose, but you know, for choking hazards and so on, I tend not to do anything on these now because these are going to babies. Our baby, her name, she has a name now, her name is Rose, so this is going to baby Rose. So that one hasn't really got an eye on it at all, but that one looks a bit like an eye. So if you've got fabric that's got something that looks a bit eye-like, then put it in the eye place there. Now, the next thing you need to do then is prepare the thing that will make it in 3 dimensions. And I think, as I explained to you, excuse me, I made mine out of the stripy fabric so that the stripes don't quite, and there's one going the opposite way, the stripes don't quite match up, which is what I wanted. I wanted that look. And then every now and then there's a little, 3 I think I put in. No, 2, 3, a little bit from the main body of the dog. Now you sew all this together in exactly the same way as we sewed the pieces of the dog. So by now, if you're a beginner at this, you've sewn loads of seams in the flat, which has given you all the preparation you now need to sew this, which gets a little bit trickier. So generally I would suggest starting with a long run. Don't do corners to start with. And so maybe we would start here, down this side of the dog here. Okay, so exactly the same as we did it before, right sides together, matching up these junctions here, exactly the same. And we're going to stitch in the same way all the way around here. Now you'll have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you start on the tail end, and then we have to turn a corner and do a 3-dimensional thing. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to show you how we do some of this slightly trickier stuff so that we've got the whole of the gusset of the dog sewn onto one side of the dog. We still have all the papers in there, so it's got a load of structure to it, which means it's easy to handle because none of these seams, you mustn't take the papers out till we're at the very, very, very end. And then if you're romping on ahead doing this, you must remember to leave a hole to stuff the dog, but we'll get onto that bit a bit later. Okay then, so I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to go on now and stitch this onto here, and then I will show you how we do some of the trickier bits, and going around the ear and the tail is actually quite tricky because it's a small area we're covering there. Okay then, so I hope you're doing all right with your dog. Yeah, I just hope you're enjoying doing it. I've seen a few pictures on Instagram of people who are joining in with this. If you wanted to post some progress, Instagram, please tag me so that I can see it. just tag me Kate Jackson Textiles, and that I'll find that quite easily that way. I'd love to see what you're doing. If you haven't got an Instagram account, but you're on Facebook, you could try tagging me with the same thing there as well. I'm not that big a fan of Facebook. I'm not quite sure how it works, to be honest. But one of the things I promised I would do, so that's all about the dog then. I'll get back at the end of this little chat and I'll show you my corners, so that how we do those. But I wanted to talk to you about some of the other English paper piecing that I've done over the years. It was my mum who taught me to do it, like with everything that I know how to do. It was my mum. And so I'm going to show you now some of the other things that I've made with English paper piecing. One of them is pretty epic. I made it for an exhibition that I was part of a few years ago, and yeah, I'll show you that one. It was definitely pretty epic. And then it hung in the Festival of Quilts in the NEC in Birmingham, and that was nice to see it there in the public. But now it's hanging up here at home. Come on, let's go and have a look at it. But before I show it to you, I'll just show you, these are the base pieces that I made it from. So these are hexagons. So just like we sewed the fabric onto squares for the dog, the hexagon then, and I have a little Sizzix machine that I cut these very accurately, because if you thought the squares had to be accurate, these have to be far more accurate to fit together really beautifully, so that you get no gaps when 3 of the edges come together. So this is a box full of the bits I have left over, and in exactly the same way I sew the fabric, get a bit of fabric. So I just cut the fabric just 1/4 inch bigger all round than the papers. Sew them on in the same way. I know some people glue them on, that's fine, doesn't matter how you do that, so long as the paper is beautifully attached to the fabric. And then in exactly the same way as we've done the dog, I just stitch these together, 2 sides like so, and then right sides together until you end up with something like this, which is that lovely honeycomb that, there we go, that bee combs are like this, aren't they? Bees do a very efficient shape of storing their honey. So what I'm going to show you upstairs then, these are pretty much the leftovers from the big project. I have this piece hanging upstairs because there isn't a lot of wall space for it, it's quite big. So we'll go and have a look at it now. So here it is, it's between 2 doors on the landing in the upstairs, and that's the whole thing of it. Look, the background, the sea, is all pink. For some reason that really bothered my mum. Every time she saw it she'd say, "Why have you made the sea pink?" But it wasn't meant to be representational. The background is all exactly the same fabrics. And there it is, the United Kingdom. And I live there. That's where I live, round about there, maybe a tiny bit further south. Yeah, I enjoyed doing it. It was a labour of love. It took me all one summer, where I spent some time every day making it. And now it's just hanging upstairs in my house.